27 years ago, a school bus carrying an entire kindergarten class never made it to their field trip. No wreckage, no leads, no arrests, and just like that, 18 black children vanished. The police called it a tragic accident. They blamed faulty paperwork, poor records, confusion, and they moved on. But one mother never did. She kept that class photo all these years. And one day, she saw a clue. What she saw changed everything. And that's when the truth began to unravel. Welcome to Memory Nest. If this story hits home, subscribe and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now let's begin. In the spring of 1995, the sky over Jasper, Georgia was cloudless and kind. Birds chirped against the school bell as children scrambled toward the waiting yellow bus. Giggling, tripping over untied shoelaces and sticky lunch pails. Loretta Field stood by the school fence, watching her son Malik clutch his little backpack with both arms like a held treasure. He was 5, sweet, imaginative, curious. He hated bananas, loved anything blue, and still had trouble tying his shoes, but swore he could read the trees like a detective. Today was his first school field trip, a visit to a historic plantation turned farm museum 2 towns over. Loretta had signed the form reluctantly. She didn't like the idea of him being far without her, but Malik had pleaded, and she didn't want to be that mother, the overprotective one who robbed him of memories. Before the bus pulled off, the teacher gathered the class in front of it and snapped a photo. The kids grinned with juice-stained teeth. One girl had her eyes closed mid-sneeze. Another kid threw bunny ears behind Malik's head. The teacher laughed, shouted something about saving it for the yearbook, and then the kids climbed aboard. Malik waved from the window. Loretta waved back, unaware it would be the last time she saw his face. By 3 p.m., the school office phones began ringing. Parents waiting in car lines were told the field trip had been delayed. No panic, just a mix-up, probably traffic. Loretta's stomach churned. By 5 p.m., the police were called. By 8 p.m., helicopters circled the county. And by midnight, the official line was this: the entire bus, 18 kindergarten children, 1 teacher, and the driver, was missing. No crash site, no communication, no witness reports of the bus ever reaching the museum. It had vanished somewhere between point A and nowhere. The other parents screamed, cried, prayed. Loretta asked questions. Who drove the bus? Where was the roster? Why hadn't there been an escort vehicle? Where are the toll records? The dispatcher logs? She got no answers. Instead, she got a pamphlet on grief, a forced hug from the principal, and instructions to be strong for the community. But Loretta couldn't stop obsessing. Her baby hadn't just vanished. The road didn't swallow him whole. There was no way a full school bus could disappear in broad daylight without someone helping it disappear. She clung to the only thing she had left, the class photo taken moments before they boarded. She printed 3 copies and kept one in her Bible, one in her wallet, and one on the fridge. She stared at it daily, counting faces, memorizing smiles. Sometimes she slept with it under her pillow, as the proximity to the paper could pull Malik back. In the months that followed, the town did what towns do. They mourned, moved on. The school built a memorial garden and held candlelight vigils every April. But slowly, the candles stopped. The names were forgotten. The grief softened into silence, except for Loretta. Every anniversary, she wore blue for Malik and visited the woods off Highway 16 where she believed the bus had gone off-road. She walked the brush, sometimes alone, sometimes with a flashlight. Once, even with a hired diver to search a dried-out creek bed, she found nothing. People whispered about her, said she needed to let go, that her son was gone, that clinging to the past was no way to live. But Loretta had buried too many friends in cheap coffins. She had lived too many years watching police ignore missing black children unless their faces made the right kind of headlines. Malik didn't get a national news segment. He got a paragraph in the local paper and a line on the evening news between weather updates. She didn't need public sympathy. She needed her son. 29 years passed. Loretta aged. Her hair thinned. Her knees ached. but the photo remained untouched, protected, a relic of the truth no one else could see. Then one April evening in 2024, while cleaning out her closet for spring, Loretta pulled out the photo from a worn folder. She looked at it hundreds of times, but this time she used a new magnifier app on her phone. She zoomed in on the edges, the windows, the shadows. That's when she saw it, just behind Malik. Faintly visible in the reflection of the bus's side window was the outline of a face, adult male, pale-skinned, wearing what looked like a uniform. Not the teacher, not a student. She blinked, zoomed in further. The image pixelated, but the shape was there. The jaw, the eyes, the cold stare. Her fingers trembled. That face hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, hidden, ignored, unrecognized. All these years she stared at the children. But this time she saw him, the man on the bus. Loretta's chest tightened. She ran to her kitchen drawer, pulled out her old PDA directory from '95, flipped through names and staff photos. The man wasn't listed. She checked the yearbook. Nothing. She called the school district archives. The transportation records were gone. Purged in a flood, or so they said. She called the police with her findings. They told her it was likely a trick of light, a glare, a smudge. She hung up on them because Loretta Fields was many things, but she wasn't crazy. This was a face. And that meant her son might still be alive. Loretta sat at her kitchen table. The photo spread out like a crime scene. She angled it toward the window, twisted it beneath the overhead light, even used her reading glasses. Anything to make sure her eyes weren't lying. But there he was, a man watching from inside the bus window, his face half obscured by glare, but clear enough to send a current through her chest. He didn't belong. Loretta had memorized every staff photo from Jefferson Elementary back in 1995. She still had the PDA rosters tucked in her filing cabinet. She'd even cut out the yearbook photos of the teachers, laminated them, and labeled them with sticky notes. She knew who drove the school buses, knew their names, their routes, their church affiliations. This man was no one. He was in the photo, but not on the records. That night, Loretta placed a photo beside her phone and dialed the Jasper Police Department. It rang 6 times before someone answered. The young dispatcher didn't know her story, didn't know that she used call every week, then every year, then only on anniversaries. Loretta explained her name, the bus, the children, the face in the window. She was transferred to a sergeant, then told to hold, then told they'd look into it. They didn't ask for a copy of the photo, didn't even ask for a number. She hung up, furious but not surprised. This was what 29 years of silence looked like. The next morning, she marched down to the library and scanned the photo herself using the digital imaging machine. The face came up clearer on the monitor. Loretta saved the image to a flash drive and printed 5 copies, each labeled with a date and a sticky note that read, "Unknown male." She tried again, went to the sheriff's office this time. They were kinder but condescending. A new deputy offered her a seat, said it was probably a lighting issue, asked if she considered seeing someone about her grief. Loretta didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood up, tucked the photos back in her purse, and walked out. That night, she opened her closet and pulled out a shoebox she hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside were newspaper clippings, maps, copies of bus route schedules, and a yellow cheat title field trip consent form. She stared at Malik's name, written in her own hand, her signature below it. A yes to permission, a yes to trust. She wanted to set it all on fire. Instead, she opened her laptop. She didn't know what she was looking for, not really, but she knew someone out there did this. Someone drove that bus off the route. Someone erased records. Someone raised her son. Unless he was buried somewhere she hadn't found yet. That's when she remembered a name. Noah Egret. He'd been on the local news a year ago. Some investigator case about a lost inheritance and a fake cousin. He was an ex-cop who now worked as a private investigator. Got results. The news anchor had said, solved the 20-year-old property fraud case. Specialized in cold leads. Loretta called him the next day. She didn't expect him to answer. Didn't expect him to believe her. But he did. Not right away. His voice was cautious, professional. He asked questions like a man who didn't want to get involved in a wild goose chase. But Loretta wasn't wild. She was prepared. She showed him the photo, told him about the missing bus, the non-existent driver, the lack of any police effort. And she said 4 words that stopped him mid-sentence. "I can pay you." They met in person 2 days later at a coffee shop off I-75. Noah was in his early 50s, white, graying at the temples, with a look of someone who'd seen too many courtrooms and not enough justice. He sat across from Loretta, sipping slowly while she spread her evidence across the table like gospel. He studied the face in the photo for a long time. Then he said, "I'll run it through some databases. Might not get anything, but it's something." Loretta handed him a binder. Inside was every detail she compiled since 1995. Routes, names, district maps, even a list of children who went missing in surrounding counties within the same decade. She watched his eyes flicker with something she hadn't seen in years from anyone in law enforcement. Respect. "Someone took them," Loretta whispered. "That man. He was inside that bus. And if he's still out there, I'll find him," Noah said. What came next was slow, painful, hopeful. Noah pulled school district archives, looked for private bus contractors from 1995. Only one stood out, Mayflower Transit Services, a company that existed for less than 3 years before dissolving. He traced one of the names linked to its registration. Vernon Hatch, ex-prison guard. No known address since 1997. Last spotted in Kentucky. Noah showed Loretta a photo from an old ID badge. It matched the man in the window. Loretta's hands trembled as she held the printout. The man she'd stared at for weeks was no ghost. He had a name, a job, a paper trail. They filed an official missing persons alert with the FBI. Again, this time attaching everything they had. And for the first time in 29 years, the system couldn't ignore her, because now Loretta had more than grief. She had a name and a trail. The deeper Noah dug, the colder the trail got. Vernon Hatch hadn't used his real name in decades. After Mayflower Transit Services shut down in late '96, he vanished. No tax records, no phone bills, not even a traffic ticket. The man had evaporated. But Noah had been doing this long enough to know that no one disappears completely. You just had nowhere to look and how to listen when the right things made no noise. He started with old addresses, land purchases, vehicle registrations, and government contracts. Most led to dead ends. But then he found something buried in an archived list of fuel deliveries in eastern Kentucky. A name, not Hatch's, but a company tied to him. A delivery made once a month. Cash payment. Always the same gas station. Rural. Remote. The name on the logs, Evergreen Supply Company. But the company didn't exist. Not officially. Noah showed Loretta a map dotted with red pins. They marked sightings, old land deeds, strange service orders. One region stood out, Cumberland County, Kentucky, deep in the Appalachians. No cell signal. No paved roads. Just forest. He contacted a drone operator from Tennessee. Quiet job. No permits. And when the footage came back, Loretta nearly dropped the laptop. There, nestled between ridge lines, was a village. Not a house. Not a cabin. A whole village. Rows of hand-built wooden structures. A garden. A pen of goats. A schoolhouse. A bell tower. And people. Adults moving in patterns. Working fields. Hauling buckets. All dressed similarly in muted earth tones, like they belonged to another century. No signs. No driveways. No license plates. But in one of the still images, paused mid-frame, was a young black man hauling firewood. Even from 1,000 miles away, Loretta's breath caught. It was Malik. Noah cross-referenced the footage with facial matching software. It was a 91% match. Enough to convince the FBI something was worth looking into. Detective Rhonda Avery joined the case officially now, armed with proof. She reviewed Loretta's files, Noah's investigation, the drone footage, and began the process of escalating it to federal jurisdiction. She sat with Loretta in a quiet diner on the edge of Jasper the night before the raid. "I believe you now," Rhonda said quietly, stirring her coffee. "I didn't then, and I'm sorry for that." Loretta stared down at her hands. "I don't need sorry. I just need him back." The next morning, the FBI moved in. For black SUVs climbed the winding Appalachian roads. Helicopters circled once the tree line cleared. What they found wasn't what anyone expected. There were 34 adults living in the hidden village. Most had no last names. They introduced themselves only by first names or biblical monikers. Elijah, Grace, Silas, Ruth. There were no phones, no computers, no electricity, no mirrors, no books besides a self-published rule book titled The Path of Obedience. The children, now adults, had no memory of their original lives. They'd been taught they were survivors saved from a fire that killed their families. They were raised to believe the outside world was violent, chaotic, and dangerous for black children, that Vernon or Brother V had rescued them and kept them safe. They were taught that questions were betrayal. They lived without birthdays, without stories, without music beyond hymns Brother V approved. And Vernon Hatch, now a gaunt, bearded man in his 60s, stood calmly in the center of the compound as the agents swarmed in, hands raised like a preacher. "They're mine," he said. "I saved them. I gave them peace." One by one, the residents were escorted out, confused, quiet. Some wept, some stared blankly, and some resisted, kicking, screaming, trying to escape. They didn't understand. To them, the world they were entering was a lie, not the one they'd been living in. It was then that Loretta saw him, standing at the back of the group, shoulders slumped, eyes searching the treetops. He wore a linen shirt, simple pants. His hair was twisted into loose coils, his face weathered but familiar, her voice caught in her throat. "Malik," she whispered. He didn't look at her, didn't flinch, didn't recognize the name. The agents let her through. Carefully, slowly, she stepped toward him. "Malik," she said again. "Baby, it's me. Mama." His eyes twitched just slightly. I don't know you," he said quietly. "My name's Elijah." "No," she said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out the old class photo and held it to his face. "You're here," she said, pointing. "That's you. I've been looking for you for 29 years. He stared at the photo. His hands trembled. "That's not me," he said, but his voice cracked halfway through. "You were 5. You loved chocolate milk. You hated bananas. You told me once the trees talked to you. You made me swear never to cut the tall one in our backyard because it was your tree guardian. You remember that?" His lips parted. Then he turned and walked away. The agents let him go. He sat on a stump at the edge of the woods, breathing fast, head in his hands. Loretta stood there, watching, waiting. Rhonda stepped beside her. "It's him," she said. "I don't know how long it'll take, but it's him." Loretta didn't blink. "I'll wait," she said, "however long he needs," because her son had been taken from her once. And this time, she would not let him go. The compound was silent after the raid. The adults, those who had once been children on that missing school bus, were separated for questioning, then transported to a nearby trauma center for medical evaluation. Most had no identification. Some didn't know their birthdays. A few had never been outside the boundaries of the village in their entire lives. One by one, they gave names they believed were true. Elijah, Ruth, Gideon, Grace, Josiah, biblical names. Loretta sat in the sterile hallway for hours, arms folded over her stomach, as if she could keep her heart from spilling out across the room. Malik, Elijah, sat with a counselor. He didn't speak much, just stared out the window at the clouds, as if seeing the sky for the first time. When she was finally allowed into the room, she hesitated at the door. He turned. No smile, no anger, just confusion. He was wearing borrowed clothes now, jeans and a gray t-shirt. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, knuckles white. He looked older than 34, like the years he'd lived had been heavy ones, carved deep into him. "You again," he said, voice flat. Loretta stepped inside. She didn't reach for him this time, just pulled up a chair. I'm not here to force you to remember me, she said quietly, but I'm your mother, and I've waited 29 years to see your face. He looked at her with a strange mixture of curiosity and fear. They said my parents died in a fire. No, baby, Loretta said, tears building but not falling. That's what he told you. He blinked slowly. Brother V saved us, he said. The world didn't care about us. That no one was looking. Loretta's jaw tightened. I never stopped looking. I gave the police everything. They ignored me. You were taken from that bus. You were raised in a lie. He stared down at his hands. Why would he lie? Because that man wasn't savior, she said. He was a thief. He stole you from me, from your life. The counselor watched silently from the corner, giving them space. Malik closed his eyes. I don't remember anything. Just dreams. Pieces. I dream of trees and voices I can't see. And fire. Always fire. Loretta reached in her purse. I brought this, she said, placing a small worn cassette player on the table. It's the only thing I had left that played this old tape. You made it for me in kindergarten. Your teacher helped record it. You sang to me. She pressed play. A tiny voice crackled through the speaker. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Malik's face twitched. You make me happy when skies are gray. He turned away sharply, gripping the edge of the chair. Stop, he said. Loretta paused the tape. He was shaking now, his lips trembling. He pressed his fist against his eyes like he was trying to force something out. I know that, he whispered. I know that song. He looked at her again. For the first time, not like a stranger, but like someone trying to see through a thick fog. You sang that to me, he said slowly, uncertain, before something. I don't know. It was warm. I felt safe. Loretta's voice cracked. Yes, you used to ask for it every night before bed. He leaned back in the chair, breathing hard. I don't know who I am, he said. That's okay, she replied. You don't have to remember everything. We can build it together. For a long time, he said nothing. Then quietly, what was my name? Malik, she said. Malik Dorian Fields. He mouthed it like tasting a forbidden word. Malik. Then he asked the hardest question of all. Why did anyone come sooner? Loretta's hands gripped her knees. Because they didn't care. Not about me. Not about 18 black babies on a field trip. I begged for years. They call me crazy. She swallowed. But I never gave up. Silence filled the room. Then Malik nodded once, slowly. Outside the window, the sky dimmed into dusk. He stared at the fading light. I don't know who I was, he said, but I want to know who I could have been. You're still here, Loretta said. That's enough for me. Meanwhile, the FBI completed their initial sweep of the compound. Hidden under the chapel were folders filled with falsified birth certificates, handwritten obedience contracts, and a makeshift punishment ledger, notes of solitary confinement, enforced silence, even public shaming rituals for those who asked about the outside world. Brother V had rewritten their lives. One of the young women, Grace, real name Kendra Bell, approached Rhonda Avery with trembling hands. She remembered something. My mom used to wear rose perfume, she said, and she had a mole on her cheek. I thought I made her up. She had not. Her mother had filed reports, had tried, but the paper trail stopped in 1997. Now the FBI was contacting those families. Some of them had died thinking their children were gone forever. Others were about to get the call Loretta once dreamed of receiving. For days, Malik barely spoke. He slept on top of the covers in the hotel room the state provided, ate little, kept the TV off. When Loretta visited, he sat by the window, always by the window, as if needing to see the world to believe it existed. Loretta didn't push him. She brought him new clothes, quiet meals, old photo albums. She left them beside the nightstand without opening them. She wanted him to choose. And one morning, he did. I want to know who I was, he said. They started small. Malik opened the photo album, studied his face as a boy, his missing front tooth, his obsession with Spider-Man, a birthday cake shaped like a dinosaur. His fingers traced the edges of the images like they might burn him. That's my brother? he asked, pointing to Marcus in a school play costume. Loretta nodded. He's waiting. He didn't want to rush you. Malik looked again. I don't remember him, but I feel like I should. You will, she said softly. He turned the page, then closed the album. Later that week, they returned to Georgia. Not the house he grew up in. It had long been sold. But Loretta's new place. A smaller home with sun-damaged siding and wind chimes on the porch. Malik walked through each room slowly. His hand brushed the wall like he was checking for hidden compartments. His steps were tentative. He paused often. In a guest room, Loretta had laid out a small box. Inside were Malik's baby shoes, a blue ribbon he won in kindergarten for a potato sack race, and a cassette tape she played for him in the trauma center. He held it gently in his palm. I had a voice, he said, before he took it. Loretta sat beside him. You still have it, she said. You just haven't used it in a while. He stared at her. I don't know how to be Malik. You don't have to be the boy you were, she said. Just be. That night, Loretta cooked his favorite food, or what used to be fried catfish, collard greens, macaroni. He ate in silence, but this time his silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a bridge still under construction. And then came the moment that knocked the breath out of her. He picked up a fork, stared at it, and said softly, Mama, will you sing again? She didn't ask what. She just wiped her hands on a towel and stepped closer. You are my sunshine. Her voice trembled at first. My only sunshine. Malik's lips moved with hers, not loud, just mouthing the words like muscle memory, like prayer. You make me happy when skies are gray. His eyes filled before hers did. You'll never know. Dear, how much I love you. She reached out and placed her palm against his cheek. Please don't take my sunshine away. And Malik, Malik again, crumbled into her arms. He wept for everything, for what he never got to remember, for what he feared he never would, for the nights he spent believing no one wanted him, for the children he grew up beside in silence, for the moment his brain had locked away like bad dreams. He cried until Loretta's shoulder was soaked, until her arms ached, until her knees gave and they both slid to the floor. She held him like she had when he was 5, and she whispered, "You're home." The next morning he spoke more, asked questions, looked through his old toys, held a faded drawing he'd made, stick figures, a house, a tree with a giant green swirl labeled Tree Guardian. "I dreamed of this," he whispered. Loretta smiled through the tears. "That was yours. You said it protected you." He nodded slowly. Maybe it did. Elsewhere, the other survivors began their own reckonings. Some refused to speak to authorities. Others clung to the only life they had known. Kendra, once Grace, was one of few who tried to break through. She spoke on a panel organized by the state, trembling as she described the rules, the silence, the punishments. Her voice quivered, but she refused to stop. "I thought it was love," she said. "We were told we were saved, but it wasn't love. It was control, fear. We didn't even know what our birthdays were. We didn't know there was a world waiting." Her hand shook. "I didn't know what real love looked like until I saw that woman hug her son and never let go." Her mother had passed 3 years earlier. Kendra had no family left. But Loretta stood at the back of the auditorium that day, and when it was over, she wrapped Kendra in a hug like she was hers too, held her long enough for Kendra to finally cry. As for Brother Vernon Hatch, he was convicted on 34 counts of felony abduction, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and conspiracy. He remained silent during most of the trial, never made eye contact, never spoke in his defense. He gave no statement, no remorse. But on the day of sentencing, he looked directly at Loretta in the courtroom. She didn't blink. "You thought they'd forget," she said aloud, her voice echoing in the gallery. But I didn't. Outside, reporters crowded the steps. Loretta didn't speak, but Malik did, standing before cameras for the first time in his life. He spoke not with certainty, but with courage. "My name is Malik Fields. I was taken when I was 5 years old. I've lived most of my life under another name, in a place that wasn't home. He paused. The crowd leaned in. But I'm standing here today because someone believed I was still out there. And if there are others like me, I want them to know. Someone's looking. You're not forgotten. And if you can hear this, keep surviving. Keep waiting. Because somebody's still coming. Then he reached for his mother's hand. And for the first time, the world looked. It took months before Malik called her mama again. Not because he didn't want to, but because the word felt too big, too sacred to be said lightly. He tested it one afternoon in the backyard while watching her clip laundry to a line. The sun warmed his face as he whispered it under his breath. Mama. Loretta turned, slow and stunned, and he smiled. Small, shaky, but real. That night, she didn't sleep. She just sat in her room, holding the baby shoes he'd once worn, as if saying the word out loud had finally broken the last chain he'd been carrying. Malik began therapy soon after. The state offered support, but most of what he needed couldn't come from doctors. It came in pieces. Watching reruns of shows he used to love. Smelling scents that once made him feel safe. Learning how to laugh again without feeling guilty. Loretta caught him one morning dancing. Barely. Just a sway to an old record playing Al Green. He didn't notice she was watching, and she didn't interrupt. She just stood in the hallway with her hand over her heart, smiling through tears. They were healing, slowly, together, but not everyone was. Of the 34 adults recovered from the compound, 12 had been children on that missing school bus. Some were too traumatized to reintegrate. A few returned to distant relatives. But many, like Kendra, had no one waiting. Some of the missing children had never been found. The bus had been fuller than anyone realized. Over the years, Brother V had taken others. Runaways. Orphans. One girl had been abducted during a grocery trip with her grandmother in a nearby town. But because she was in foster care, no one filed a real report. Now, with the case public, dozens of cold files reopened. Families across the South began asking questions again. Photos were pulled from drawers. Names re-added to registries. The FBI called it an unprecedented break in a decades-old kidnapping ring. Loretta didn't care about headlines. She only cared that her son was home. One crisp October morning, they returned to the field behind the elementary school where the bus had once taken off. It had been repaved since. New swings, new buildings. But the old oak tree remained. The one Malik used to call his tree guardian. He stood in front of it now, taller than she remembered. But in his eyes for a moment, he looked 5 again. He knelt beside the tree and placed a photo of the class there. It was the same photo. The one with all 18 children. The one with the reflection of a stranger in the window. I never liked pictures before, he said quietly. You were always camera shy, Loretta smiled. I like this one now, he said, because it doesn't let him win. It's the proof. Then he placed a small stone at the base of the tree, smooth, painted with the names of the other children, those who'd been found, and those who hadn't. A memorial, but not an ending. That weekend, Loretta hosted a dinner at her home, not just for Malik, for Kendra, for a boy named Isaiah who had started remembering his real last name, for Marcus, for Rhonda, for Noah. Everyone brought something. Kendra brought cornbread and flowers. Isaiah brought a pie he'd bake himself. Malik brought a small wooden carving, a replica of the school bus he made in therapy. When everyone sat to eat, Loretta stood to say grace. But her voice broke halfway through. She looked at the table, at all the people she never expected to see together. Thank you, she said instead, tears falling freely now. Just thank you for coming home. Malik rose and placed his arm gently over her shoulder. You're the reason we made it back. The press moved on eventually. Other tragedies took over the headlines. But for those who lived through it, the aftershocks continued. The survivors formed a support group. They met once a month, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. They called themselves the ones who were found. At the first meeting, Malik stood at the front. I don't remember everything, he admitted, but I remember the silence, the loneliness, the way we were told nobody was coming. He looked at Loretta, who sat near the back, notebook in hand like a student. She proved them wrong. He paused. And maybe, just maybe we can prove something too. That even after the worst kinds of brokenness, there's still something left to build. There was no applause, just a quiet, heavy nodding from every soul in that room. On the 1-year anniversary of the raid, Loretta and Malik returned to the woods where the compound once stood. The buildings were gone now, bulldozed, but the land still carried the weight of what had happened. Malik brought a new sign. He planted it at the edge of the clearing. This is where we were lost, and this is where we were found. Loretta ran her fingers across the lettering, then reached for his hand. "You're my sunshine," she whispered again. He squeezed her hand gently, "and you never took it away."